Thanks everyone for coming to our Reading the World Conversation Series event, the second one of our fall season. We have one more event, before we get into anything else, one more event this fall, which is on November 9th. It's a Tuesday, and it's going to be a special event for the Ledig House, which is this international writers residency over in Omai, New York, like north of Albany. It's really pretty, very crazy. And it will be 4 authors from all over the world that will be reading and talking about the literary scenes in their particular countries. So be sure and come out for that. And also, before we get started, I should also thank our funder, which is the National Endowment for the Arts, for making this event possible, and the College of Arts and Sciences for helping make not only this event, but Open Letter, 3%, blah, 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 translation program, all of that possible. So tonight we're going to talk about the state of international publishing. And we have 2 guests with us, Steve Dolph and Yana Genova. And I'll introduce them briefly, and then they each have different presentations to make. But as they're making them, after they make them, we want to make this as roundtable-y and as interactive as possible. So any questions you might have about publishing, about translating, about anything, be sure and ask right away. Like, we don't want to wait until like the 10 minutes of the end or any of that kind of stuff. Like, bring your questions on, bring it all on right away. So first off, Steve Dolph is a translator from Spanish who translated this book, Juan Jose Sayer's The 65 Years of Washington, which is now available from Open Letter and is actually available in the back for $10, so you should all buy it because it's awesome. He also used to run a magazine called CALQUE, which I'll also talk about in a minute, and works at Scribe doing like various typesetting, basically. Now, Yana Genova works in Bulgaria at the NextPage Foundation and is here on a 6-week fellowship, essentially, a 40-day fellowship that was sponsored by the CEC ArtsLink in New York. So she's here in Rochester to learn about publishing and about translation trends in America, how books get published, and then she's going to New York and learning more there. And she'll be talking a little bit about publishing in Eastern Europe and in other countries. We want to start off with Steve to talk both about the process of translating Sayer and to read a little bit from the Sayer book, and also talk about what it's like trying to publish literature and translation and get an audience for it and run a magazine in America in these times. So I'll turn over to you.
So Juan Jose Sayer was an Argentine novelist, late 20th century. He died in 2005. He was from a school of writing that was opposed to magic realism from the magic realist school. So the writing is modernist, has to do a lot with memory, and it's very focused on real place, not like an imaginary, fantastical place, but the real political situation in Argentina at the time, and I mean the 70s and the 80s, a time in Argentina that was really politically, socially, and economically turbulent. And so he writes a lot about a particular city called Santa Fe that's on the Rio de la Plata, the River Plate. He focuses mainly on a group of art students and politicians from that time period. And translating him, I had to do a lot of learning about Argentine literature and Argentine history to figure out why such a narrow focus in terms of subject matter was interesting to him. And why so many other Argentine writers were so interested in this particular way of writing, in this particular way of thinking about Argentina. And so for me, the approach was really one of trying to get inside the head of the readership in Argentina and see the way people read him and what interested people in Argentina about this writer, and try to translate out of that. Through that research, I learned that Juan Jose Sayer was devoted to William Faulkner, particularly. And it was because Faulkner wrote about a particular place, a rural place, and he used that place to talk about larger themes in American history. At the time, it wasn't history. I mean, at the time, it was really happening. And so I was able to use Faulkner's example as a way to find a voice in English for Sayer. What else should I say about?
One of the things I was going to say about one of the things. Is this working?
Yes, yeah.
Is that fine? Okay. One of the things with the Faulkner thing too is that Sire uses the same characters over and again in a lot of his books, which does reflect the same sort of vibe. But otherwise, I don't know what else you say about him. He's unique. Like there weren't very many writers like that.
Hi, I'm a book blogger, and I actually just reviewed the 65 Years of Washington, and I did refer to Faulkner. It seemed very reminiscent of Absalom, just the way he meanders. But apparently the original title was Glossa, and I was wondering, one of my fellow bloggers who's read Sire in the original Spanish, he wasn't happy about the title change, so...
Well, he was wrong. It's the best title ever.
So I was just wondering about the title change.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. The question was, the title in the original Spanish was glosa, which literally translated means gloss. And that word is dense in English. It has, well, I'm not going to go into the meaning of the word, obviously. You can all look it up. But the meaning is very dense, and the book is very dense, and so there's a nice connection there. But at the same time, the word has a glibness in English that doesn't necessarily carry in Spanish. And so I guess through a lot of discussion with Open Letter, we decided on this alternate title. The wordiness of it sounded right.
And and part of it, Gloss is would be a weird book title, I think, for most readers. Like they wouldn't know what's behind that or anything. And part of the book, it revolves around two main characters who are walking for 21 blocks, and they're talking about this party for Washington, what's the full name?
Jorge Washington Noriega.
Which is a really great literary joke, right? And he had this birthday party, and neither of the characters went to the birthday party for one reason or another. So they keep talking about it, and they're obsessing about what happened there, and they hear from other people that they encounter sort of what happened there. So it's kind of like a central running part of the story of the plot. And the phrasing of the 65 Years of Washington is way cooler than Washington's 65th birthday or something like that. So it did have a nice ring to it. And it's one of the phrases that you translated actually into the book. So we pulled it from there. But mainly it's because gloss sounds gross. It sounds like teeth or something. You wouldn't want it to deal with that as a buyer. So we had to change it. This happens occasionally.
Yeah. Yeah, I have. I guess to go a little bit further into that. Everyone who knows the original novel has brought this issue up, and it's the first thing they talk about. I had a conversation this past summer with a friend of Sire's, and he said that he visited Sire in Paris 3 or 4 years before he died, and talked about what it was like to be translated and how he felt about the meaning being lost, because he was someone who was very meticulous about his word choice. I suppose all writers are. And he said, I don't give a shit. It doesn't matter to me. Once it's out of my hands, that's it. It's a completely different book, and I don't care. Which might seem kind of crass, but I think he just felt like if I would try to control everything, every part of the translation's life, he would just go insane. And so knowing that he felt okay with the book changing and taking on a completely new life, that made it feel okay for me.
Well, why don't you read a few pages?
Okay, yeah, I'm going to read from the middle of the book, particularly where that line appears. So Chad introduced it pretty well already. Two characters have been walking down the streets of Santa Fe discussing this birthday party, and their walk is a straight line, but their conversation meanders. And the way the novel reads is also very meandering. And so I hope you guys get a sense of that. I'm going to do my best with this microphone and reading. Chad's going to be my page turner. All right. Just back from Europe, the previous Saturday, the mathematician had boarded the ferry to see a rugby match in Paraná. Leaning on the railing of the upper deck, with his lit pipe clenched tightly between his teeth, watching the big tractor trailers lining up in rows on the lower deck, he sees Boton board at a run, holding a bag in one hand and his guitar case in the other. And, judging by the speed and precision with which he climbs the stairs and walks up next to him, without lifting his eyes once, thinks Boton must have seen him from the dock, before getting on the ferry. Boton, who, as the mathematician guessed at seeing him sidestep, clean and freshly combed and shaved, the trucks maneuvering noisily, almost at a crawl, to board and line up on the ferry. Boton, who the mathematician I was saying no, has guessed his plans to spend the weekend with his family in Entre Rios, who, as soon as they sat down on the wooden bench on the upper deck at the stern, began telling him in complete detail about the birthday party. They've taken the midday ferry for different reasons. The mathematician because he figures that since the trip takes 2 hours and the match starts at 3:30, he will have time to walk to the field. And Boton because, as he put it, he should have taken the 10 o'clock, since the bus to Diamante leaves at 2:30. But he overslept and now he'll barely have time to get from the docks to the station and jump on the bus. It's cloudy but not cold, both reasons they can stay on the deck at midday. Blinded by repetition, they don't see the gradual withdrawal as the ferry moves away of the suspension bridge on the southern side, the Regatta Club, the harbor, Alto Verde on the opposite shore, the inlets, the islands, the canoes and motorboats that, in the opposite direction, are navigating toward the city. The overcast sky is unique. The clouds are small, almost square, stuck together at the ends, which are a darker gray than at the slightly protuberant centers of each, motionless. Motionless, they cover the whole sky to the horizon, almost all the same size, so that the firmament, whose name was never better suited, the name applies to the starlit sky, and not specifically to the clouds, gives the impression of being a concave stone wall vault. That rocky, stable sky would last all day, until at nightfall, without a sound, it would begin to dissolve, not before passing through a much darker gray, a smooth phase, with an ever-increasing rainfall that would last until the evening the following day. But at midday on Saturday, above the ferry, the river, and the islands, it still conserved that hardness of pavement. Boton, who has left the bag and the guitar on the bench they're sitting on, takes a bar of chocolate from his pocket, and undressing it, why not? Halfway down its 2 layers of printed and silvery paper, extends it to the mathematician, who, with distant and pensive courtesy, refuses it. Without formalities, Boton asks, point blank, the inevitable question, "How was your trip?" And the mathematician, a few seconds later, with his gaze fixed on the point where the ferry's wake begins to disappear on the surface of the river, hears himself repeat for Boton, not without a certain distaste, the list of cities that brings with them the supposedly empirical images that, ever since his travels, accompany their names. Venice, the real gateway to the east, and not Istanbul. Warsaw, there was nothing left. Bruges, they painted what they saw. Madrid, the thing you feel you've lost abroad, you rediscover there. Boton observes him a few seconds, without blinking, his head slightly tilted, already thinking about something else. Eating his chocolate, and when the mathematician finishes, without offering any comment, he starts telling his own story, as if their stories, which have nothing to do with each other, were complementary. Boton, I was saying, no, that blonde, curly-haired boy with a blonde goatee and almost transparent blue eyes, who when he sings along to his guitar does it so softly that you have to lean in with your hand to your ear and turn toward him to hear anything. According to Tomatis, Boton's only deviance from rigorous nationalist observance is the excessive consumption of cognac and Paraguayan caña that, while both are national brands, are in fact manufactured beyond our borders. Boton says that early in September, or late August maybe, he doesn't quite remember, there was a big party at Basso's ranch in Colastine Norte to celebrate the 65th anniversary of the birth of Jorge Washington Noriega, the 65 years of Washington, in Boton's words. That he had run into El Gato at Fine Arts, and that El Gato had invited him and told him to bring his guitar too, that the guests had arrived slowly. The first of them had gone to the back of the patio to pick vegetables with Basso, who had just gotten up from his siesta. The thing had lasted till dawn. So, meandering.